It was interesting because, right after Britannia, um, there was an explosion of some really great brands, sportswear or denim. Um, and we saw a niche, which was there was no one really doing tops, especially woven tops. And we were fortunate that that niche panned out, where we found that we were selling 3 to 4 tops, Shah Safari tops, for every bottom that was being sold. And in our business, you definitely get really turned on with numbers and product, how it's checking out at retail. And by 1989, NPD, which is a National Product Research Group, sent us a notice. It was a good notice, stating that we had reached, as Shah Safari, 24% of the national market share. And we had no idea. And we were just so thrilled. And as we looked at the company holding the second largest market share at that time, it was 12%, and it was collective of all the private labels. So we were quite shocked. You had asked earlier, Stella, about Seattle being on the map, and we have had some really interesting stories when we would go out and present ourselves in different parts of the country. And one of the stories which we still laugh at today is we literally had some buyers in South who thought that Seattle was part of Canada.
Or we had still on dog sleds and part of Alaska.
Right. Yes.
Thank you so much, Raj. And Dean, I mentioned guru of the merchandising. He has really made a big contribution to Nordstrom. Now tell me, were you at Nordstrom in '85?
Right.
Maybe you could tell the audience where you were and where you are today with your new company, Tailorbird.
Okay. Unlike this group, I started with Nordstrom, so I started from the retail side and then moved over to the manufacturing side. So originally I started in footwear. I think everybody that was in management at Nordstrom at one time or another sold ladies' shoes, and that's how I started in the business. But then went into men's shoes buying, and was really one of the first product development people for the company. Developed the Nordstrom boat shoe, the little sailboat that you see on everything, and all the shirts and that. Actually, I have the original boat in my basement that we used to develop that. And then migrated in '85 over to the apparel side of the business. And myself, I feel very fortunate that I had an opportunity to work in an environment where offshore sourcing was becoming more and more important, but in the better goods. And that's where I learned, when I say better goods, more detailed, more quality, high-end fabrics and stuff, and a higher price point. So from that, it required us to be very detail-oriented about our specification packages, about all of the way we did our business day in and day out. And what generated from that one person back in 1981 to, I retired 3 years ago in the product development area, we grew to about 500 people, which represent about 20% of the total business that's done at Nordstrom. From that, after retirement, I couldn't get it out of me. I wanted to go and start my own brand, and hooked up with a couple gentlemen in New York who are quite a bit younger than me, and it's worked out very well for us. We still source internationally. We buy product from Europe. And what's interesting about the business, just give you a little light of how it's changed, is we may buy our textiles in Italy. We'll ship them to, let's say, Hong Kong, and then the sewing may be done partially in Hong Kong, or it may be done in China, or in both places, depending on what happens to be the quota situation. Even though there is no such thing as quota anymore, it does have, there are controls in place. We may buy our buttons from Japan, or we may buy our buttons from Europe, Italy or that, or we may buy Brazilian Cronosa buttons made out of the nut. Our sewing thread may come from the U.S., it may come from China, embroidery thread from Korea. The labels could be made in Hong Kong, or they could be made. So what it is, it's bringing all these things from all over the world into one location and making the delivery. And so I think the biggest thing that young people now learning in the business is the whole detail-oriented aspect of it. We're really instruction writers now, and we only have one shot of our sampling, just like it was mentioned from the Britannia those days. So.
Thank you, Dean. Another guru, in my opinion, is David Edelstein. In foundation design, it's all about branding and all about researching your target market and then creating the product to appeal to that target market, and probably a lot more of that. So, David, what were you doing in the 80s? And maybe you can share with people what you're doing today, which is very vital.
The 1880s?
1880. Did I say 90s?
I mean, I'm the oldest person probably in the room. But anyway, as to the first thing that you brought up, actually, we did early on as an organization have a vision for being vertical branders, which means that we'll work with people to start companies from the very beginning, take out the testing and develop it all the way to the consumer. Those steps along the way would include labeling, graphics, hang tags, all that kind of thing, plus taking the products to the trade via pre-line or the trade shows that were mentioned by Winnie in Las Vegas, and now the men's and women's shows are there too, but through trade shows, into research, into the consumer level. So we call that vertical branding. To do that, we had to create a number of disciplines that interacted together. So we're a full-service architectural firm, and we build buildings around the world, but not skyscrapers, maybe 14, 16,000 square feet for our clients, and then bring them to a level of branding that supports what the vision of the company's about. A lot of words, but that's what we do. In addition, we're a full-service advertising agency, so we have television, radio, print running, and then interior design group and a graphic design group. So all those things put together create what we feel is the soul of a brand and or a single voice that can be expressed in all these different media. Along the way, in the 1880s and the 1980s, we were looking at how to fit in and looking at Seattle, and we lived here, but we wanted a job where we could travel and still have the best of life, and thank God we were given that opportunity. And how that occurred for us was to say, clearly, as a goal, we did a lot of work and consulting ourselves on ourselves and so on, and in the early 80s decided we wanted to help put Seattle on the map. I don't say we did that at all, and certainly I'm not a guru. All you have to do is ask the people I work with, but or our clients. All we ever did,
Yes.
all I ever did was follow Steve around, basically, from company to company, and that created a whole occupation on its own. So, and as he was successful, we would stand up and say, look, so, and we still do that today with Steve and others. It's a relationship business, and quite frankly and honestly, we did say we want as a job in life to put Seattle on the map, and that's really changed because now the world's so interconnected, and something that happens in Seattle that was once to be admired as very Seattle now affects the whole world, and vice versa. It's not so much a competitive effort anymore. I think all of the manufacturers need each other to do well because there are so few left. When you look at what's happened to the tailored clothing industry in America, when you look at what's happened to so many different things, and I'll turn over the microphone now, but we were very interested in creating Seattle as a fashion capital to bring people here, and we're so sorry we did.
But actually, David's very modest. He was instrumental in the development of many of the fashion companies in Seattle. He worked with Britannia Sportswear when they started. He worked with Genera Sportswear when they started. He worked with many others. One of recent note, Tommy Bahama. That brand imaging, the store design, everything was done by Foundation. And he works internationally now with Victorinox, Swiss Army, and other companies. So he's a brand powerhouse.
Thank you. So sweet.
And because David's talking, David doesn't produce garments. He produces images. He produces the image of Tommy Bahama and creates that and draws us into buying products. And for me, coming up through the industry over the years, what I've seen is a huge shift away from production toward marketing. I remember first jobs I had, there was a sales force, and there was a sales manager, and go on the road with samples and sell the product. And I've seen over the years the proportion of the number of employees of a company totally shift, so that people who are involved in marketing, or even people who are hired from outside the company to do marketing, the dollars, the people, the emphasis is on creating an image, is on meeting the needs of the customer, finding out what those are, designing around those needs. And David certainly is definitely a pioneer in that area for all of these companies. And that I think in Seattle we have certain niche markets that our companies, when he was talking, certainly Nordstrom, customer-oriented and really listening to what does a customer need and how can our companies here really respond. The outdoor industry is very large in Seattle and many different little niches. I just wanted to mention two things that have come together between the ski industry and winter sports industry and the young men's industry has allowed Seattle to become the snowboard and skateboard capital of probably of the world. We have Zoomies up in Everett, and they hire people that have worked in the companies, the young men's industries here, and we already had a claim to the ski industry, so it was an easy transition. I have great hope for Seattle in moving forward into different niche areas as we go forward, and even though many of the jobs that are here have left the country, more and more, even of the creative jobs are leaving and have left. And maybe you guys would like to talk about that a little bit.
I think that's a very interesting subject because, in the 70s through most of 80s, we had what I would call a very generic fashion markets. If you had something that worked in one part of the country, chances are that it's going to move to rest of the country. Sometime early 90s, we realized that America is changing in its demographics. And when I say demographics, it's not just the race, the color, the age, but also in the demographics of the liking of
Olympia on behalf of our organization last year, and that just wasn't an issue. But I think the point that's more important is it is easy to cast aspersions. It is easy to say what you don't like, but it's important in our community right now that we have leaders who will stand up and get things done. And we obviously don't have the transportation infrastructure we need. And all the cities around the country, major cities, are doing better than we are. So for our civic leadership to sort of stand on the sidelines and raise issues rather than get in and help make this happen, we only have three choices with regard to transportation. You can build at grade, have a system like buses or rail. You can tunnel, which is extraordinarily expensive and with our soils in Seattle, not necessarily the best approach, or you can go above grade. And if you're going to go above grade, that's a monorail system or a system like you have up in Vancouver, BC. So the point is, we need a mass transit alternative. We need people who are going to get involved and make it happen, and we need to make sure it is the best it can be. But it's not okay just simply to say you don't like it. It is what the voters voted for. We need to get it done, and we need to do it right.
Before I go to Peter here, Henry, do you want to kill this project?
It's not a question of killing it at this point. It's a question I was against the project. There's no question in the beginning I was against it when the vote came up. As John Magnuson said, and I think it's clear to anyone, if you put 10 people smarter than a bear in a room and said you have $1.7 million to spend, what would you do? And well, if people talked about I-5, if they talked about the viaduct, if they talked about the east-west corridors, you might agree, you might not agree with their choice. Build a fixed system from Ballard to West Seattle? That would raise some severe questions. But that's not the issue. The voters approved it, and at this point in time, I want to ensure that the voters get what they were promised. They were promised a dual guideway. Now we have 4 miles of single guideway. I'm sure Ann's got a response to that.
Right. Okay, Peter, let you jump in here because you actually, you helped push all this along. then you sort of went away for a while. Now you've come back to be a part of all of this debate and trying to make sure that this gets done.
Well, apparently, according to Henry, I'm dumber than a bear, so I don't know if we really, want to hear what I have to say.
I will not comment on that
But,
one way or other.
I said smarter than a bear.
What I looked at was that with the comprehensive plan, with more density coming into the city in 2050, 2040, that we needed a transportation system that was grade separated, that would give people time-certain travel. In 1968, we had an election. It's remarkable when you read it. The same arguments were made that Henry's making today. They come from bus riders. We don't really need it now. We can build more freeways. They even suggested at the time that we could use helicopters to transport 100 people at a time. So it was easy for them to be against it. The chairman of the Sensible Citizens for Transit were Vic Gould and James Wasson, and they led the successful campaign to stop the transit in 1968. Now that very route that goes from Ballard to downtown out to West Seattle was part of that plan, that if we would have voted for it in 1968, we wouldn't be talking about this today. And in 40 years from now, if we don't get this built, the people are going to be saying, why didn't we build something back then? Why didn't we build a monorail? And I appreciate what John said, that John said we need to look out into the future, into 2050, and that's exactly what I was doing. And I think that we need to start now. We can see maps with one line on it and say, gee, this doesn't serve the whole city. But it takes years, decades, to build up a good transit system, and I think we need to start it now.
Let's take our view of phone calls here because I want our folks here in Seattle to have an opportunity to weigh in. Let's go to Jeff here in Seattle. Jeff?
Hi, this is Jeff Logan. Ann and Peter and John and Henry are all familiar with me. I
You guys are old buddies, huh?
For Ann and Peter. I found Peter's recent recitation just given very amusing, citing some past events in Seattle transit history, and I guess that's where Peter's living now, Peter in the past. And that's where monorails pretty much belong. I oppose the project, and I think it's a bad idea. Now, my question for the panel is, the 69,000 ridership figure is cited quite frequently by the SMP, yet if you drive the 14-mile line, you will find that the only dense areas are in Queen Anne, downtown, and a certain part of the West Seattle Junction. The rest of it is pretty much low-rise, single-family homes, empty spaces like Inter Bay and North Ballard and Crown Hill, and 2 water crossings. Where are all the people going to come from who are going to ride and comprise the 70,000 riders a day on this line, or the 20 million a year, unless, of course, this is designed to promote transit-oriented development with condos and densification along the line 20 or 30 years from now.
All right, let me get a
Where's the
response
ridership going to come from?
Okay, thank you very much, Jeff. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, you bet. So the city did an intermediate capacity transit plan before the monorail was proposed, and this is the route that the city prioritized as the most important route for the transit improvement in the city. It's the narrowest spine of Seattle, and as you know, your only alternatives in that area are to go either on the 99 on the viaduct or on I-5, and both of those are pretty well clogged up most of the time. So by going through the heart of downtown, you're serving each of the key stadiums, the financial district, the retail district, Pioneer Square, the International District, Queen Anne, the Seattle Center, as well as the neighborhoods at the end of the line. And all of those neighborhoods deserve service, and if you look out over the growth projections over the next 20 to 40 years, those are areas that the city is hoping to get additional density in, and the monorail is intended to serve them as they grow.
John, you want to respond to that?
I'd like to just add to that Henry already says 82% are transit riders, so it's only the 18% that we're discussing, whether we add 18 or not. So whenever you enhance transit, of course you're going to get mostly existing transit riders to start out with. Only if you build a transit system where nobody wants to go can you get all new.
John?
Right. When you look at the issue of ridership, one of the things that I think has been totally ignored is the fact that ridership is so dependent on 2 factors. Number 1, the cost of the total trip, and number 2, the time of the total trip. Since there are no park and ride facilities at any of these stations, it's all a feeder bus. Either you have to be close enough to walk to the station or you take a feeder bus, and there's no agreements with the buses. So the level of service from the buses has not been determined. The cost of the bus service has not been determined. The fares on the monorail have not been revealed either. And so it is impossible to predict ridership without that information.
Isn't
So-
that the next process here with the transit agreement?
Plus, there have been some changes, Enrique, and I think those are important to note. And the changes now are that we have 4 miles of single guideway, which slows it down, A. Secondly, and you have stations now that are in question, including 2nd and Madison downtown, whether it's going to be built or not be built. Their plan now provides that if we don't build it, we're going to put sidewalk improvements for $2 million in, so that you'll have no stop downtown between Pioneer Square and 2nd. It was 2nd and Pike at the time we voted. They've moved it closer to Pine. It's a very different system. The ridership numbers, again, 69,000 trips, not people, divided in 2. But it's also based upon the fact that people are going to have to pay not only for the 50% of the people that are coming off of buses, they're going to have to pay both a bus and a monorail fee based on your projections. And that means that today, if you have to pay $1.25 for a bus, you're going to have to pay 75 cents for the monorail. With the slowdowns in the new construction, plus increasing the cost by 1/3, query, are that many people going to ride it? We don't know.
So I just have to, there are just so many things that we're not right about that. First of all, single beam is a terrific idea. The idea behind single beam is that in single-family neighborhoods or in neighborhoods where you don't have as much dense development as through the downtown, you ought not build the same size infrastructure if you don't need it to serve ridership along that part of the line.
Pardon my ignorance, when you say single beam, are we talking about the column, or are we talking about the track?
At the top of the column, where you have your guideway, you can either have 2 side by side or you can have 1. And if you look at the ridership projections and you look at the aesthetics and the design, which these gentlemen say they care about, it just makes tremendous sense to have single beam at the ends along the neighborhoods where the ridership demand does not require the double beam in order to serve all those folks. It still allows for system expansion, it's better for the environment, it allows for quicker construction, and it still serves all the projected riders. There are a couple other things, Enrique, I just have to jump in and say about that. So in terms of the stations, there is a station right at the heart of the Pike Place Market. There is a station plan for 2nd and Madison. There's absolutely nothing in our projections about replacing that station with a sidewalk. And there's absolutely nothing about adding a 1/3 more to the cost. So I appreciate a good debate, but I would like it to be based on the facts.
But what about the costs of the fares? I mean, when are we going to get that determined?
Sure.
Is that the next process now for
the normal
next step?
process for a transportation system is that you decide fares about a year before you go into operating the system. We haven't even begun the construction yet. So for folks to say that fares haven't been decided by the board, you bet that's right.
Let me take a phone call here because I think it gets to the heart of probably what is on other people's mind. Let's go to Mike here in West Seattle. Mike?
Yeah, my concern, I've got lots of concerns, but I guess my fundamental concern is the cost. I was prompted to go to the Las Vegas website after I read Councilman Steinbrecht's report on his trip. And I see that they had a $650 million bond issue for 3.8 miles. And it's built on a fairly benign surface. It's all flat. They've got wide streets. There's only one switch that I was able to find to go from 2 tracks to 1. There are no bridges that they have to modify. They have ugly supports. And the construction costs, according to Weeks, I believe it was, is about $100 million a mile. Now, ours is 14 miles, so I would just say, well, you know, it would be about $1.4 billion since it's 14 miles long. We've got complicating issues like there are 12 2-track to 1-track switches. The building surface is hilly. The streets are narrow. The West Seattle Bridge was not compatible with the monorail.
Mike, can I jump in here? I just want to ask you a quick question,
Sure.
just so I can kind of move things along here. So you brought up
why is the, okay, I'll get to the heart of it, which my concern is that what confidence do you have in $1.75 billion since fundamentally the Las Vegas system used up all the money, will be a lot more money for a much simpler system.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Would you like me to jump in? All right. Well, there are 2 teams competing to build this line and to then operate and maintain it. So they'll be involved in all phases of the project. One of the wonderful things about the way we're approaching this project is that oftentimes transportation projects run into issues where only part of the line is developed because costs go up between phases of the project, or because after it's built, the contractors, the designers, and the operators have issues with each other when you have service problems. That's called the integration, system integration. We're trying to avoid both of those with this project by using an approach called design, build, operate, maintain. So the two teams right up front have to propose to design, build, operate, maintain the system for 5 years, all in one with a fixed price bid. So you know, before you embark on building it, whether the whole thing can be built. We're requiring 14 miles, up to 19 stations, all of the things that you've heard about. And as John mentioned, the RFP is quite extensive. It's actually about 4.5 feet. And the system specifications are there for that reason, is to require the teams who are bidding on this, who are competing for it, to propose the system that we're going to require.
But there's still no guarantees that it won't go beyond that 1.7.
Well, if they are not able to make proposals within the price cap, that's when you find out at the beginning. But it's not like a regular traditional transportation project where somewhere along the line somebody comes back and says, we need more money.
Okay, John?
I personally have been involved in over $1 billion worth of design build projects in the last 10 years. I've been in the role as an engineer working for the contractor. I've been in the role representing the owner. And if you think that design build protects the owner against any possibility of change orders, you're in trouble. The only protection that you have, and I keep coming back to this, is the contents of that request for proposal. Society for American Military Engineers sends out a magazine, and there was a proponent of design build in the last issue actually said that if you do not have an ironclad RFP, the chances are that your project can go out of control both on costs and schedule.
An RFP is request
for proposal. That's what they're bidding on. So.
Right, okay.
And that one, go ahead, Peter.
Well, I think it's great.
How nice of him to do that.
It is very nice. And I think it's great of John to look at that RFP. It's certainly a concern to every citizen in Seattle. I'm glad that the City Council is doing a financial review, that they're going to look over the numbers. If we can't make our numbers, then, you know, obviously we can't build the project. I mean, that's clear. One thing I'd like to add about Las Vegas is that, you know, with their initial 4-mile system, they've got all their controls and all their costs that are, you know, just for 4 miles. And the Las Vegas system retains a royalty on the train because they developed that train. I think the train cost was close to over a third of the total cost, which is unusually high because they developed that train for Vegas.
How many months behind schedule is it?
I think there's something like 4 to 5 or 6 months, you know, something in that range.
And they're paying damages every day, so the taxpayers are not left holding the bag.
Henry, there was something you wanted to add?
The DBOM doesn't tell the design, build, maintain, operate. It doesn't tell the whole story. That's half the cost. You have something known as agency costs, and there is no limit on the agency costs. And Anne smiles divisively, as she always does, because I'm sure the best and the brightest.
Very quickly explain agency costs. I mean,
well,
briefly.
There will be hundreds of millions of dollars of agency costs, but I'll give you one example. Let's assume you come upon an unknown environmental risk. They have done less than 10% of the engineering on this project. Let me defer to John on this because he deals with it.
But when you say agency costs, are we talking about the monorail project
The DBOM,
itself?
that is not in the DBOM contract.
Okay.
But John, explain that because you've done it.
And I'm only going to ask you too that, you know, I know you guys know this really well, but when you say RFP and all of those things.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
And I'm sorry I glaze over, but I mean, just
if
explain
you
that
glaze
because,
over it,
yeah, so people can understand exactly what this is. Go ahead, quickly.
I mean, even on projects where you have complete designs, complete blueprints of the whole project, there's lots of opportunities for change orders, even though you think you have a fixed price. Anyone who's remodeled a house and has had plans, they know what can happen. When you have documents that only give general requirements and not specific requirements, the risks are just as high for change orders. And they get leveraged by the fact that not only are you having to change the construction, you're having to redo